Welcome, everyone, to a two-part series on Psalm 10. I thank you for joining me here today. So, Psalm 10. Why Psalm 10 at this time? I go back to the Psalms a lot in these videos because the Psalms are, to my mind, one of the richest books in the entire Bible, bar none. I love reading the Gospels and studying the Gospels and teaching through the Gospels about the life of Jesus and his teachings and his words in the early church and the letters in the New Testament, Romans, Galatians, Corinthians, Ephesians, the list goes on. All excellent, excellent books with excellent, beautiful passages and strong teachings in them. But the Psalms are a book that I hope you love as well and you continually come back to because while the entire Bible really is timeless and appropriate for any season of life, the Psalms itself contain such a breadth of material that you can find in them almost any subject worth talking about, any concern mankind has, and believe it or not, the Psalms contain more prophecy of the New Testament, of the Old Testament times, whatever it is you're talking about, messianic, kingdom prophecy, they contain more prophecy than any other book in the Bible. And they're quoted more often in the Bible itself than any other book, New Testament and Old Testament. So the Psalms, even if you're talking in the Bible context of other biblical authors or biblical people, Jesus and Paul, Peter, on and on the list will go, the Old Testament prophets at times. The Psalms are a book that all of them definitely spent a lot of time in and saw a tremendous amount of value in. So Psalm 10, it's a simple psalm. It's not short. Some of the psalms aren't very short. Some of them are incredibly short. There's quite a breadth there. Psalm 10 has no proclaimed writer on it, so we're not. It doesn't say. There's nothing here to indicate right off the bat what time period we should put in it, and it doesn't really focus on a time period or a specific context, more of a general context. And the psalmist writes about mostly, almost from the perspective of the wicked person. Now, this is not uncommon in the Psalms. You see this numerous occasions where it's almost like the wicked person or the sinner or the ungodly person, whoever it is that's in view, is from their perspective and is thinking in their own mind, and the words they're thinking in their own heart and their own actions. So this is not uncommon, but most of the psalm is from this perspective. And there's some interesting insights to be learned because sometimes you can learn just as much by someone showing you what not to do as them telling you what to do. Learning from the negative instead of the positive example. Now there's some positive things in this psalm as well, don't get me wrong. It's not all just focusing in on negativity. I hope you don't get that from this psalm. But I believe there's a lot of value to be learned and gleaned from looking at things. If God says this is what wicked people think and do like, if I avoid that, that would be a whole lot better, and I'll be a lot closer to that righteous person that he really wants, that he created for me to be. So without further ado, let's get into the first half of Psalm 10. I encourage you to pause this video if you haven't already and open your Bible. And if you would, go ahead and read Psalm 10, verses 1 through 11. And then start this video again. And we'll go through them again and look at some highlights, if you will. So go ahead and pause, and I'll see you in a minute, if you're willing. All right, if you're back, let's start at verse 1 and read together. Why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In pride, the wicked hotly pursue the afflicted. Let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. So right off the bat, the psalmist is questioning God or crying out to God. Why are you not here, God? Why aren't you doing something about this time I am in, this time of trouble? Now we could maybe correlate something to that. We might could understand a little bit of that context. I don't know what times you're specifically going through, but generally speaking, most people seem to think the world and our nation and various people are going through some difficult times right now, some troublesome times. And does it seem like God's not doing anything? Like he's standing a long way off and you just can't quite hear you, no matter how loud you cry. That's how this psalmist feels. He says, in pride the wicked hotly pursue the afflicted. The bad guys are beating up on the little guys. Bad guys are beating up on the defenseless. And he asks, let them be caught in the plots which they have devised. For the wicked, verse 3, boasts of his heart's desire. And the greedy man curses and spurns the Lord. The wicked, in the haughtiness of his countenance, does not seek him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. So we have a lot of things here just straight off the bat. The wicked, the greedy, the wicked again, the haughty. And all of their thoughts, they're boastful. They curse and spurn the Lord. They don't want anything to do with him. They run down his name. They speak evil of him. They do not seek him. And all their thoughts are, there is no God. They don't like to entertain the reality of God's existence. They proclaim that doesn't exist. They don't want to deal with that. They don't believe in that. They don't like what those kinds of thoughts would entail. Verse 5 is interesting. His ways, the wicked man, prosper at all times. It seems like the people that do wickedness, they're the ones that are winning. They're the ones that are getting better off. They're the ones that are making all the money and making all the decisions. And their dreams are coming true, or whatever you might call it. But the rest of verse 5 gives us a little bit of God's perspective. Your judgments are on high, out of his sight. As for all his adversaries, he snorts at them. He says to himself, I will not be moved. So this wicked man, he does not entertain God in his thoughts. He doesn't think he exists. He curses him and he spurns him, but he doesn't consider him to exist. And he seems to be succeeding. But what he doesn't know is that God's judgments are out of his sight. Now, if you go down to the beach and go swim in the water, you can't always see that there's sharks in the water. Whether you see them or not, sometimes they're there. But you're not believing or seeing that they're there doesn't make them go away any the less. Now, this is not to get you to fear going to the beach. I hope you do and have lots of fun. But the point is, just because you don't believe something is there or entertain that thought in your mind doesn't make that cease to exist. Oftentimes, those things that surprise us because we didn't consider that they might be present. So this wicked man, he seems to be prospering. He doesn't entertain God in his thoughts or in his actions or in his attitudes. But God's judgments are very much real, but they're out of his sight because he's not looking for them. And he's not concerned for his adversaries. He says, I won't be moved. Throughout all generations, verse 6, I will not be in adversity. I'm doing good now, and I'm always going to be doing good. I'm always going to be on top. His mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression. Out of mankind's mouth, out of our mouths, out of my mouth, out of your mouth, proceeds words. And if you're not a believer that words are both the most powerful and the most destructive thing you can probably do in your own life, then I hope you learn that lesson soon. You can destroy people and you can build people up with just words. You can praise God, you can curse him. You can find salvation and you can reject it, all with just your mouth. Well, this man's mouth is full of curses, deceit, and oppression, and under his tongue is mischief and wickedness. He sits in the lurking places of the villages. In the hiding places he kills the innocent. His eyes stealthily watch for the unfortunate. He lurks in a hiding place as a lion in his lair. He lurks to catch the afflicted. He catches the afflicted when he draws him into his net. He crouches, he bows down, and the unfortunate fall by his mighty ones. You see the picture here? The picture just compounds on itself again and again, and its intensity. You can see the fact that it's almost like if you were to put yourself in the victim's shoes, you're walking along a dark path at night, and this wicked person is crouching like a waiting lion, ready to opportunistically pounce and devour his prey when he's unexpected, unaware, and has no power to defeat him. He's very opportunistic. He's very, very watchful, and he wishes the destruction of his prey. He's looking out for number one at the expense of everyone else. He says to himself, verse 11, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He, that is God, will never see it. Well, part 2 of this psalm deals a little bit with God's response to this, or the psalmist bringing forth what God does do. Because at the first part of the psalm, he cries out, God, why are you a long way off? Why can't you hear us? Why can't you see? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble like these? And then he describes these times of trouble when these wicked people are taking advantage and they're destroying and they're devouring the oppressed and the afflicted and those who can't defend themselves. Their greed and their just evilness are consuming them and those around them. And the wicked's response is, God doesn't exist. His judgments are out of my sight. God's forgotten. He's hidden his face. He won't see. They curse, malign, and spurn the Lord. So what's the lesson to be learned from this first part of Psalm 10? I think the first most obvious lesson is, don't be that person. Don't be the person this Psalms describes. If you have a mouth that curses and lies and cheats and brings deceit and oppression, then close that mouth. Then close that mouth and learn some good words. Build some good habits. Get out of those situations or lose those things that are causing you to be that way. Now, that's easier said than done. The strongest people in the world are those that can rule their own tongue. And it is no easy feat. But begin there. Begin in the mind. Begin in the mouth. And let that lead your actions. You may have to remove yourself from some things that are causing you to wander in those areas, or to think those things, or to do those things. First and foremost, just try not be the person that this describes, because all the bad things on earth, that's a little too strong. Most of the bad things on earth are done by people, are they not? And there's a lot of bad people on earth that do bad things. This psalm describes how some of them operate. So let's avoid that at all costs. We'll deal with it next week, Lord willing, next video. But the Lord does see. He sees everything. His judgments are on high. They may just be out of your sight if you're not looking for them. If you're so focused on just getting ahead, on just getting more at the expense of others, you're not looking up. You're not looking around. You're looking down, or you're looking in at you, what you want, what you desire, what you can achieve on your own, the opportunities which present themselves. But God's judgments are real. They're out there. They may just be like a fish in the water you can't see, or the storm that's just over the horizon. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean he's not there. He is working. And sooner or later, you will see his acts, whether that's you getting the receiving end or you being delivered. He will bring justice. He will bring judgment sooner or later in his own time. We'll deal with that next week. I encourage you to read the rest of the psalm too, if you're willing, in the week, in the time leading up to next video. And I encourage you to think about it and see how God is the helper of the orphan and the widower and the person who is downcast and troubled and afflicted and doesn't have a way out. Because the first part of this psalm focuses in on the oppressor, the one who's bringing the trouble, if you will. And the psalmist asks, where are you, God? And the latter part of this psalm, it tells you where God's at. So I'm looking forward to that. Till next time, I hope you join me for Psalm 10. God bless you.